Welcome GRD132 to exercise 13, which is a continuation of exercise 12. And all we're going to do here is just do some adjustments to our CSS using something called Flexbox so that we can make a two-column layout. And then when it becomes narrow, like on a phone, we can make it a one-column layout. So we're going to start like this using Flexbox. That we're just going to have to make some containers here so we can treat this as a container and actually treat each column as a container. So we'll have to add some HTML code, and then we're basically going to make it flexible so that it's two-column, and then eventually when it gets small enough on a phone size, we'll do this. And just one thing I want to point out too, when you right-click and inspect and you use this, they do have a little button here that you click on and you can view it kind of more like a mobile device. So I'm going to move this down so that you can do that. So it looks more like a mobile device than just trying to make your screen smaller. And you can go narrower than the browser window will go. So you can see the numbers up here. You can even click on things as you're using a phone. So if we do more kind of mobile layout typography kind of things, we'll do that. So this is what it'll look like on a phone. This is what we're getting to, but that's this little button down here that's for mobile devices. So you don't have to keep resizing your screen, because every time I do that, I'm like, oh, I have an email in the background, or I have something in the background when I resize it. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to use something called Flexbox. So I just wanted to show you the finished product, and then we'll kind of adjust that. So make sure you've done ex12, because we're going to continue with your ex12 exercise. We're going to fork it, which is basically duplicating it, and call it ex13, and then we're going to do this with ex13 coming up. So to get started in ex13, in Replit, you want to log into Replit and you want to go over to your repels, and hopefully you have ex12 completed. So I'm just going to go find ex12, and here's my previous ex12, and here's another one I did. I guess we did one in class and I did one for the video, so I guess I'll do the one that we did in class, this web type RWD, our home. I'm going to open that up, and that's a previous one. That's the one we did in class, or maybe you did it at home as well. And what I'm also going to do is fork it. Now to fork it, you go right on the name here, you click right here, and this little drop down box comes up, and if you're looking for fork, it's not here, but you have to go to these little column of dots and click on there, and then there's fork, which is like duplicating. It kind of forks it off into another direction so you can make changes to it. So I'll do that, and then I'll change the name to 13, and I'll call it Flex Columns. I'm going to do here. So I'll call it Flex Columns RWD, and I'll keep my last name first initial. So that'll be my forked version. So this will be different from my ex12. So I'll do that, and then I'll open this in a new tab, which will look just like we had it last time, and I'll go in between here and shorten this because I don't need to view it here. And we're going to do a couple things to our HTML before we even get into our styles yet. Our styles will be pretty easy. We won't have to do a whole lot. But what we want to do is we want to go here and make sure that these two paragraphs, and the headings too, the H2s and the paragraphs, this whole area is basically a container. And then the children in the container are going to be the ones that are going to be in separate columns, or the way they address it, or the way they indicate it on one row. So we're going to put these on one row. But we are going to have to put these together too, or else it'll try to put the headline as a column, and then this as a column, and that headline as a column, and that as a column. So we're going to have to put them together. So we're going to have to do a little HTML here. So what we'll do first is we'll make a container that contains them. And I'm going to go find my H2, and I'm just going to hit return here, and right before here I'm going to type div. Now a div is just an area, a division, so I'll just type a div dot container. We'll give it a name called container. That'll be easy enough, and then you can just hit tab. Now when you do that, it makes the opening and closing tag. Now I want to cut the closing tag. I'll do Command X, and I'll go to the end right here before body or after this paragraph, wherever you want to put it, as long as it's after that last paragraph. And we want to line these things up too. So everything's going to be inside here, so I'm going to tab over. Now you can actually, once you get here, I want to make sure div, the closing div, is lined up with the top div, and they are. Here's the top div, there's the bottom one. And then I'll highlight all of these, and I'll just hit tab. That'll tab everything over. Now it doesn't tab over the text, but all our elements and our opening tags for the elements are all tabbed over. So that's good. That means they're children of the container. So these are all children of the container, but we don't want 4 children. We only want 2. So we'll have to do it one more time. It's kind of a pain. It'd be easier to do it from the beginning, but I'm going to go here and hit return again, and then I'm going to make another one called div.call. We'll just call it call, and I'll hit tab, and I'll do the same thing. I'll cut my closing div, and I'll put it after the first paragraph, and I'll move this back so it's underneath that div. So this div is a child of the other div, and then these I'm going to tab over again, just like that. So now we have, you know, parent, child, grandchild. I guess you could look at it like that. And then I'll do the same thing here. So before this h2, I'll put div.call and hit tab, and then cut my closing tag for div, and I'll put it here. Now this is where you got to be careful because you have all these different divs here. So I'm going to look at where this one is, and I want to move this back and make sure that div is lined over that div. And then I want to highlight these and tab them over so that the H2 and the P is tabbed over. And yes, we have new puppies here, in case you hear that in the background. So now everything's lined up. Now, both of these divs, they're the same. They have the same names. That means they can have the same properties, or we can give them separate ones. And we probably are, because we're going to have to adjust it a little bit, but I just want to show you something. Right now, they can be the same, but everything's kind of lined up. There's my container div. Here's my 2 column divs, and there's a column div. So those are what are called flex items that are going to be inside here. These are going to be flexible items. And now watch how easy the CSS is to do here to put them in 2 columns. We're going to go to styles, and then right after, I guess, this h1 p.intro, I'll put .container. Now you could put div.container or just container. Class name, you don't have to put the first part of it, the element. You could just put the class name. And what I'm going to do is do something called display, and I'll hit tab, and it's just flex. That's it. That's all you should have to do. It should automatically put it on a row. So let's see what happens right now. So I'm going to go here, and there it is. It took a little while to refresh, but there it is. Now the only problem we have here, well, we have a couple things, is as we get smaller, you can see they bump into each other, so we need to adjust that. And when we get to here, we want to have this on 1 column. We don't want these in separate columns anymore once we get to that phone size. So we're going to adjust that. And there's different ways to do this. They have something called basis that puts kind of almost a gutter between these, but it doesn't work on all browsers. So I'm going to do something else. That's why I said I didn't necessarily need to have those call classes as separate ones, but I think what I'm going to do now is just call this call 1, and then go down here and call this call 2. So we could identify them by column 1, column 2. And then what we'll do is we'll put a little padding to the left of this one and a little padding to the right of that one. And that'll kind of create kind of a gutter there, kind of a gap between them so they don't bump into each other. Now right now they look, I don't know, one looks wider than the other for some reason, although it's hard to tell because there's no padding here. So let's adjust the padding. And what we'll do is, again, back to our styles. And one thing you could do, and there's nothing wrong with doing this, and since we are going to do responsive, maybe we could put this in. Even though it's default, I'm going to do something called flex dash direction, colon. And when you have these dashes, you have to put in the colon and put in the semicolon. And I'm just going to put row. And you're thinking, well, they're not rows, but actually it puts the elements on a row. That's the way it indicates it. So I just want to do that. So that won't change anything. But what I want to do after this is put call 1 and make a declaration for that, and then I'll make a call 2, and actually I could do this. One thing, make sure you put your dot here, because class names have to have the dot. So one problem you might have, you'd be like, it's not working, and it's like you're missing the dot. It's not an element. Elements don't need dots, but classes do. So there's call 1, and call 1's the one on the right. So I want to put padding to the right. So I'm going to do like 0.5 em, which is like 8 pixels, and then I'll do padding left for this one and do 0.5 em, since we've been using ems. So I'll do padding dash right, because it's column 1, it's the one on the left, and I'll put 0.5 em, em, semicolon. And Then I'll copy this whole declaration, and I'll make sure this says padding left. And I'll change this name to call2. So now we have the class name call1. It has a padding right of 0.5 em. The class name of call2 has a padding left. So what should happen is it should put some space in there once we refresh. And it's moving slow refreshing. Still looks like this column is wider for some reason. I'm not sure why, but I'll have to look at that later and see why that's doing that. Now it looks okay, but for the first part, it seems like that column is wider than the other. I'll have to look and see why that's happening. But when we get to the first breakpoint, they seem okay. And again, what we're going to do is when we get to the final breakpoint, like a phone, we're going to make the flex go away. So we're going to make them just one single column. So let's go and do that and see how to do that. So that's going to be kind of using these things that we have right here. So we're going to use these things and put them in our one for extra small. So what I'll do here is I'll highlight all of these. The container right through column 1 and column 2. We'll highlight all those declarations and we're going to put them in here. Now you got to be careful because remember we have curly braces for the entire media query. So I'm going to go here and hit return and paste. Now it doesn't keep all the tabs. So let's fix all the tabs here. I'll tab that over, tab that over, tab that over, tab over call, tab over padding, tab over that, tab, tab, and even this last curly brace. That way you can always see that there's the closing curly brace for the entire query, and yet each declaration has its opening and closing curly brace. Body has its 2, container has its 2, column 1 has its 2, and column 2 has its 2. And again, remember, dot, dot, dot. Class names have dot. And the reason I'm putting these in here is we're going to take away the padding once they're on one column. We don't want any more padding. So we don't want any extra space on either side of those once they become one column. So I'm just going to put 0 in here. We don't have to put M. You could just put 0. So there'll be no padding right, no padding left. And if you just go here and make it column, that's why I put row, just so you can see the opposite. This will put it back on a single column going down. And you could still leave flex here because there's no flex none. It's just flex, but it's going to be the direction is going to be column. So instead of being in a single row, they'll basically be a column going down. And it's kind of confusing the way they address that. I think it would be better if it was the opposite. But anyway, it just means the items are in columns. So that should address everything just for the small devices. So let's see how this works. So as I get smaller here, and again, we're not changing it at the first breakpoint. Once I get to it, there's the first breakpoint. It's still 2 columns. And then once we get to the last breakpoint, I feel like there's another one here. How many breakpoints do we have? Maybe that's the one. Oh, it's not working at this breakpoint. That's why. It's not doing it. It's not going back. Let's see what's happening here. Let me make sure I refreshed it. I might have not refreshed it. So let me try that again. Yes, I did not refresh it. That was the problem. So now it's refreshed, and that's the way it should look. So everything looks okay now. That's what we want. That's all you have to do for ex13 is just do that. And again, it's taking it from 2 columns and then going down and making it 1 column once it goes down to a mobile device, which is the way it should look because you don't want to be reading real tiny columns like that. So that's all you have to do for ex13. And once you're done, you're just going to highlight this, copy that, and then you're going to go back to my Warren for the assignment. You're going to insert a link, paste it, and make sure it opens in a new window, just like you did for the previous one. And just add a comment, insert a link with the chain link, just like we do with Gravit, paste it, go down here, new window, hit save. If you have any questions, just let me know, but that's ex13, and that's just kind of finishing up a little bit of our RWD, but this time using columns.